We all love the Christmas story, you know, the one of Joseph and Mary and baby Jesus. And we recount that every year. And then we move on shortly thereafter to Jesus' baptism, when he's considerably older. And the Gospels are remarkably silent about the time between Bethlehem and John the Baptist. You get this one account from Luke's Gospel. And in an event which I cannot help but think was the inspiration for Home Alone, you get this brief story of Jesus and his family doing what they've done every year, around the time of the Passover, going to Jerusalem. And it wasn't just that Mary and Joseph got on their donkey and went off. It was a family deal, a neighborhood deal. Imagine a mobile family reunion with kids running around and parents walking and talking and enjoying their time on the way to Jerusalem, spending their time there and beginning the journey back home. And as they're walking and talking and the kids are milling about, Mary and Joseph go, "Where's Jesus?" And he's not there. And you can imagine that moment of panic and fright if you've ever had a kid that's wandered off. It cuts you to the bone. And so they do the logical thing. They turn around and walk back to Jerusalem. And they wander around Jerusalem for 3 days looking for their child. Now, remember all those things that happened before Jesus was born? The angel, all of those things. And in the meantime, the angels have visited Joseph and directed them to move away from Herod and the others so that their son might be preserved. For 3 days, they never thought to look in the temple. Parents. And finally, they go to the temple. And they find their boy Jesus sitting there amongst the scribes and the scholars and the teachers. And he is listening. He's asking questions. He's 12 years old. He's starting to approach that age where his mind is inquiring more and more. But everyone's amazed at what he has to say. There's something unique about this one, and we've seen that child as well. That one that just has that little bit extra, whatever it is. They engage well with adults. They ask questions they're seeking and finding. Why are you here and why did you not come with us? Well, you knew I'd be in my Father's house. And then he gets up and he goes with his parents. And it says that he obeyed them. He was obedient to them. And he continued to learn and to grow and gain favor with both God and man. That's what we know about the time in between Bethlehem and John the Baptist. Whether Jesus fully understood what was going on and that he was really in his Father's house, or whether he had gained through what his parents had taught him, what the community around him had been informed of, that this was his true home, being in the temple in the presence of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we don't know. But whatever it was that grace that filled Jesus in those moments and allowed him to seek out that place where he would find connection with the Father in heaven, that God that he had known throughout his life, through that same community that he had walked to Jerusalem with. In this morning's hymn, we hear, and I'm going to use the older English words, "For he is our childhood pattern." The new phrase in the 1982 hymnal is also appropriate, "For he is our lifelong pattern." Jesus goes to Jerusalem along with family and friends and does what they do every year, celebrating the festival of the church. Yet his heart is open to what is being spoken, not just in the festival itself, but rather what God is doing in that moment, what he's displaying to the people, that they might come to know the love of that God who created them and the God who is sending his Redeemer into the world. And so he goes and finds himself sitting in the temple. And he opens his ears and listens. And when he has questions, he asks. He does it in the presence of his Father in heaven. But as soon as his parents come and he sees their distress, he gives them a simple answer, I'm where I'm supposed to be, in the presence of God. But then he gets up and he goes and he lives with his parents. And he is obedient unto them. But he continues to learn and to grow and to gain favor with God and man. If we saw someone living like that in this world, we would see in them what I would argue would be a significant sign of grace working in their lives. The grace of relationship with God first. And then that graced relationship extending to parents and family and friends and those around, showing that God is working in them. The Reverend Canon James P. DeWolf of blessed memory was a priest in the Diocese of Fort Worth back when I was first ordained. And he was talking to us kids one day, and he said, we have this wonderful tendency to focus on Jesus Christ as the Redeemer. But we must never neglect Jesus Christ as our exemplar. Jesus doesn't just come into the world to show us that he has redeemed us by his blood, but rather he comes into the world to show us how we are to live in relationship with our Father in heaven, with our family, and with those around us. And we get a glimpse of that in this story in a wonderful way. It's not just in Jesus teaching his apostles and the disciples and doing all these things, showing us all the goodness. But at 12 years old, he displays that grace within him that we might see how grace works in us. It's his example of godly living even as a child. We don't know much else about Jesus. There are some stories in the Gnostic Gospels about how he does different things, and some of them look a whole lot more like Kevin McAllister in his sadistic assault on burglars than what you would expect from the Lord of creation. Jesus apparently had a little cranky streak, according to some of the Gnostics. But what we get in this story tells us all we need to know about Jesus in that interim period. That yes, he was like us. He was young. He was a child. He grew up. But in the whole time, he sought and received grace from his Father in heaven. May it be so for us, that we come to our Father's house, and we sit here, and we listen, and we ask questions, and we learn. We place ourselves in obedience to those around us who have authority over us so that they might help us to continue to grow. And then we strive to continue to gain favor, first with God, that grace working in us might allow us to gain favor through him with those whom we encounter. Amen.